So the recent Terra Luna collapsed and now there's Terra Luna 2. A lot of people weren't happy about that, but that's what happened. A lot of people maybe have had regrets, like Mike Novogratz from the Galaxy Digital, but that was a very interesting. I think his circumstance was really different. And in any case, Do Kwon and Daniel Shin there was a lot of legal teams trying to prosecute and go after Terra Luna. The value dropped way below anyone would ever expect it as from a top 10 coin, and the drop was the steepest that anyone has ever seen. And because of this, it began almost a contagion. The old chain became a classic chain like Ethereum Classic. Now, what was sad was the amount of people that were invested in this project with their life savings, and it seems with much more than that. I think a lot of people may have been taking out loans from lenders like Celsius, BlockFi, and Nexo. There was a lot of suicide hotlines, and a lot of people, it seems like family people that had children and they had savings that just drained down to the value past way below than they were expecting. This shows that now, even though if a project is in the top 10, that it can still collapse, like it's in the thousandth one. And so there was a lot of criticism for this project and the way it handled things. Obviously, one of the notable ones was CZ from Binance. He was tweeting along the way while everything was happening, and it seemed that the strategy that he wanted to take was not the strategy that Terra Luna developers and leadership wanted to take, and this led to half disappointment from a lot of people, but also half support from a lot of people. So the decision was split. But what's interesting is that recently Do Kwon went on a public interview. He has some interesting things that he was saying. Now, this interview has a lot of criticism, and one of them is a Twitter account named Fatman, and he was also there from the beginning. He was there in the project way before, but when the collapse happened, he especially was one of the ones that was on the other side against Do Kwon. Now, what he's saying is very interesting because he is accusing the Luna and some of its people for purposely, I guess, stealing money and not doing what it was supposed to be doing. He was looking into different addresses and trying to follow the money trail, and so he's in a major lawsuit with Terra Luna. And what is going to happen is they're going to take his account on what he thinks should have been done. And he also came out refuting the story recently with Do Kwon and the journalist, talking about how Chai, the payment system in Korea, was actually falsifying volumes, basically lying about numbers. Now, what's going to happen is this lawsuit is going to show what the future landscape for projects will be. Now, the interesting thing about the lawsuit is that it isn't just against Terra Luna. It's obviously against a lot of major VC funds, and a lot of people were criticizing venture capitals from San Francisco, and when you look at this lawsuit, you see familiar names that no one is really surprised about. And some of these names are Jump Capital, obviously the most famous, 3 Arrows Capital with Kyle Davies and Suzu. Now, what they're saying is that the collapse was basically like all TCM's collapse, and that this is a threat for not only the space but also for broader financial markets, it seems, and that they made sales of an illegal securities that they are trying to claim Terra Luna is. And this part is interesting because what they're saying is that mirrored assets and the token itself is considered securities, and that they were trying to bring in promotions by the VC firms for the 20% yield in Anchor Protocol. And these VC firms were actually putting up the cash so that they can try and grab that market beforehand and push out any competition. And so some of these venture capital firms are super familiar, like Pantera Capital, Blockchain Ventures, Coinbase Ventures, Polychain Capital, which is the most interesting one for me. And what they're accusing is these venture capital firms for actually going along with this Terra Luna situation and creating a falsified landscape for investors to actually believe what they were investing in was safe return of 20%, and they are trying to bring the hammer on all of them together. There has been a lot of criticism with venture capital firms in sort of bringing in a lot of capital to a company and sort of trying to make different companies. The outcome of different companies competing would be very different because of let's say a backing of just one of the companies. And other firms that was interesting is you see Alameda Research, which was interesting, which is Sam Bankman-Fried's company, and you also see Naval Ravikant's himself as an individual investor, I believe. Now here's the most important part for me, and the only thing I'm interested in, and that is the outlook for an algorithmic stablecoin. And when you take a look at the lawsuit with Basis Cash, what they're stating is that Do Kwon was starting Basis Cash and it had failed, and so from that failure he should have known or anticipated UST's failure to lose the peg to the dollar. And what's interesting is that the stablecoins and algorithmic stablecoins promise actually, it seems, threatens the actual different central bank itself, because it replaces, or the Federal Reserve, it replaces the need for them. And they are coming out and saying that mirrored assets or any synthetic assets are also securities. If you look at the charts of Anchor Protocol and Luna, the collapse was so great that this is the greatest opportunity for regulators to actually push through regulations for everything to be a security, to regulate them much more easily. And the algorithmic stablecoins, or any of the stablecoins, it seems, will be due for heavy regulations in the future that everybody is expecting. And obviously the recent interview had a lot of criticism because it seemed there was two sides to it, one supporting and one against it. This is the first long form interview that we've seen from Do Kwon. It does seem to have tones of sympathy for Do Kwon and Terra Luna. They seem to ideologically agree with Do Kwon and some of the things that he was saying. The more important part is that his perspective is that there might have been an insider job or concerted effort to make this happen. In his mind, he believes that there wasn't a way that this could have happened without that. His plan was Chai, which is a payment system in Korea, and they were going to use UST to transact through it. This goes back to when there was a lot of rumors circulating around BlackRock and Citadel that saw an opportunity or saw a weakness, and they took advantage of it, placing on short positions and whatnot and selling large amounts of UST. There was even talks that they actually went to Luna to get some or whatnot. Aside from that, that maybe mirrored assets or Terra Luna might be a security, I think the most important thing on the regulator's eyes is algorithmic stablecoins. And if it is a decentralized algorithmic stablecoin, then that will be quite a huge threat. And I think CZ and many others think that there's a lot of promise in algorithmic stablecoins. And if you look at the VC, they're critical of the VC strategy, like I said, where they input a lot of cash into companies to make them succeed. Some of the more notable examples are Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, Postmates. They're worried about Terra Luna 2 and what this means, but it seems that Do Kwon and other Terra Luna 2 developers are very optimistic. And so this brings up a question of algorithmic stablecoins, and that is it possible, and could UST have been successful if it had kept going on? That's the more important question for me. Was Do Kwon onto something in that? Yes, maybe it might be flawed if there's volatility drops downwards, but what happens if there was this upwards motion? And because this is an adoptions curve, there's going to be maybe very severe ups and downs. But if there was a floor raise and if it was stable, then would the UST not have collapsed? The success of an algorithmic stablecoin is a huge threat that Do Kwon would be like a Julian Assange or Edward Snowden level. And before people criticize that those guys did something good and Do Kwon did something bad, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the threat of a UST decentralized algorithmic stablecoin would be a threat to basically the entire system. When you see a lot of traditional institutions, they are very critical of all of it, to be honest. The IMF just recently came out against the UST, and what they want to do is basically they want to dismantle the whole thing. They are trying to peg the whole space, and I think the DeFi space as a Ponzi scheme. Another interesting thing about a lot of regulations that are going to be coming is in the mirrored assets, where you have synthetic stock and other equity products that people can invest in without being in the stock market. And sooner or later, there's going to be huge clashes between a lot of the projects that see it a way and people like the ECB, the IMF, and the World Bank that see it another way. And they're going to try to create a different sort of landscape in the world, and it's going to be up to a lot of these projects to make those sorts of hard decisions decisions. One of them is probably going to be either leaving the region or trying to figure out new ways to do things. But these sorts of regulations are coming for, it seems, almost everything. So that's pretty much it for everyone. If you have any disagreements, let me know. Give me a like if you liked the video, and also goodbye.